You're listening to the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast with Paula Engebretson, episode number 261. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you? What is happening? Today's podcast episode is inspired by a tweet, or I guess rather a post now that it's X. I don't actually know. I'm not on Twitter, but it's brought to you by a tweet/post that my friend Jen sent me. So my friend Jen sent me this screenshot of a post from X or Twitter a few weeks ago, and I've been thinking about it a lot recently. And it's just a really simple post, 5 or 6 sentences or so, but within these simple sentences are some really profound points that have stuck with me and gotten my brain turning. And I knew that I wanted to do some sort of episode on it. I knew I wanted to expand on it at some point. And then this past weekend, I drove about 4 hours north to visit another friend of mine. So over the course of 2 days, I had about 8 hours in the car. And when I wasn't listening to an audiobook or a podcast or whatever, I was really reflecting on these handful of sentences. And today I thought that I would share this post with you, first of all, and then some of my musings about it, some of my thoughts about this post and why it has really stuck with me quite a bit over the last handful of weeks. So the post comes from someone named Lauren Wilford. Again, I'm not on X or Twitter, so I can't really speak to what they post regularly, but this one post that Jen sent me stood out. So I'm going to read that first. And they wrote, "Big secret to happiness is just liking stuff. Finding more stuff to like. Finding ways to like stuff you didn't before. Recognizing what it feels like to like something and doubling down on that. What feels frivolous is actually the whole ballgame. The big secret to happiness is just liking stuff." I love this idea, and I love how the writer takes this simple yet true statement and breaks it down even further, basically into 3 parts. So underneath this overarching umbrella of simply liking stuff, she's then referring to, number 1, finding more stuff to like. Number 2, finding ways to like stuff you didn't like before. And number 3, recognizing how it feels to like something and doubling down on that. And I know it all sounds really simple, okay? To be happy, just do these 3 things. Find more stuff to like, find ways to like stuff you didn't like before, and recognize how it feels to like something and double down on it. And there are, of course, certainly many layers. I am sure there are probably many objections to this simplification, but still, I love it. My ADHD brain loves having a simple set of steps, a simple framework, which you've probably gathered if you've been listening to this podcast, right? I love a simple framework with one clear goal. And since many of us are in some sort of pursuit of happiness, whether we actually use the word happy or fulfilled or joyful or purposeful or what have you, I think this framework is a powerful one to explore. Now, importantly, even though it is a simple framework, that does not necessarily mean easy, right? Simple does not always mean easy, and that's an important distinction. Simple refers to something that is straightforward. It's uncomplicated, right? It is lacking complexity. So it is a concept that we can grasp relatively quickly. Easy, on the other hand, refers to something that requires little effort. Easy means that it's usually not particularly difficult to accomplish whatever the task or activity is that we're considering. So while the writer's perspective on happiness is a simple concept that breaks nicely into a simple framework, it's not necessarily easy to adopt. Now, it might be, but I do want to make that distinction first before we dive in even further. So again, the quote was, "The big secret to happiness is just liking stuff. Finding more stuff to like, finding ways to like stuff you didn't before, and recognizing what it feels like to like something and doubling down on that. What feels frivolous is actually the whole ballgame." So today I would love to dive into what I'm pulling out as this simple 3-part framework that I think could be really compelling for all of us to play around with, whether you are thinking about your life as a whole, trying to create more happiness or contentment or joy in your life overall, or if it's one particular area, whether you're looking for greater happiness or fulfillment or peace or contentment or satisfaction, what have you, in work or your relationships or your home or a particular hobby or a habit or a routine that you're working toward, or whether you're thinking about it more broadly overall. Either way, what would it look like to focus your energy over the next few weeks on, number 1, finding more stuff to like. Number 2, finding ways to like things you didn't like before. And number 3, recognizing how it feels to like something and doubling down on that. So let's look at each one of these in turn. Now, before we do, if you are new to the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast, first, welcome. I'm thrilled that you're here. And second, I know our brains can sometimes slip into overwhelm and shutdown when we see and come to a new podcast with a lot of different episodes. The brain's like, oh my gosh, I have to listen to all the episodes. I don't know where to start, so we don't. Okay. If that is familiar to you, I've got you. That's why I created the Busy Awesome Roadmap, which you can get through the link in the show notes, or you can head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/map. So this is a free podcast roadmap that highlights the top 10 episodes I recommend checking out to get yourself up to speed and ready to work with your ADHD brain. And then it also highlights popular listener episodes by category, whether it's planning and time management or goal setting or follow through or perfectionism, etc. Okay. So if you are looking for a place to quickly get up to speed, head through the link in the show notes or go to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/map and get that podcast roadmap. Provide your brain that supportive structure it's looking for as you learn how to work with your ADHD and all the tools that feel best for you. Again, that's I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/map. All right, now let's dive into this 3-step process. Starting with number 1, finding more stuff to like. Now, depending on where you are in your ADHD journey and your current season of life and how you feel about finding and learning and starting new things, this first part of the framework might land differently. Okay. So for some of us ADHD brains, we may want to just jump on board immediately with step number 1, to find more stuff to like. The thrill of discovering new things can be incredibly appealing. We thrive on that novelty, that variety, the excitement of jumping in and learning new interests, learning new things. It brings this rush of enjoyment. And if this sounds like you, then step 1 of finding more stuff to like will probably be an easy one, right? We talked about the difference between simple and easy. This one might be easy as well. And if that sounds like you, the growth edge will be to check in with yourself to discern whether you're diving into something because there is that genuine interest of finding new things to like. As I talk about in episode 172, it might be that full body yes, you genuinely want to dive in and learn more about it. Or if you are exploring this particular topic because you think you, quote unquote, should, or since other people are doing it, you should look into it too. So that's going to be your growth edge. Are you diving in because you have this genuine interest in learning about and liking something new, or are you doing it because it's a should or a have to, or everyone else is, so you probably should too? That kind of energy. Okay, that's going to be your growth edge. But generally, if your ADHD brain loves to find more stuff to like, keep on keeping on with this one, with step 1. As long as you are doing it intentionally and the rabbit holes aren't keeping you from doing the work that you want to do, the stuff that you've already planned to do, then let yourself drop into that joy of exploration as you follow your curiosity and you find more things to like. I'm all in. Okay. Now, this response that I just described is not necessarily how all of us will respond. Okay. Some of us might feel some hesitation. Some of us ADHD brains may feel a little bit of reluctance, maybe even a little bit afraid to pursue this path of finding more things to like. And this makes sense It is no secret that a lot of us have this history of starting projects and not finishing them. And if you're like me, if you're like some of my clients, this pattern can lead to some pretty big feelings of guilt, feelings of frustration, feelings of shame. And the sheer idea of considering adding more interests, more projects, more things to like into that mix can seem a little bit overwhelming. Your brain might be thinking, no more. More things to like means more unfinished tasks and unfulfilled commitments. And if this sounds like you, I would first invite you to challenge some of those thoughts. Is it true that you've literally never finished anything, or that you never do finish anything? And also, is it true that liking more things inherently means that more things are going to be left undone? Right? It's possible that that's not the case. And in fact, I'd invite you to consider the possibility that finishing everything isn't necessarily the goal anyway. What if the real point here is the experience of learning and exploration, and ultimately liking more stuff along the way? That's the end goal, not whether or not we've checked it off the list. So I offer that just to ponder. And then secondly, as always, I invite you to practice so much compassion with yourself and any of that discomfort that comes up around the idea of finding more things to like. If your brain is worried that finding more stuff to like might mean more opportunities to drop the ball and not finish things, perhaps play with the idea that it's okay to try out this new thing without the pursuit of mastery or completion on the other side. What if that's just not part of the equation? Who says you have to finish it? What if there isn't a ball to drop? What if success is actually finding joy and delight in the act of discovering something new, of finding something new to like? What if that is it? How might that be true? Okay, so some of us are going to love this step one. We're going to dive right in. Some of us might feel some hesitation because we have a lot of stories about how we never follow through. And so if we start liking more stuff, it'll be more balls to drop. Some of us might also feel a bit of cynicism. Okay, we might be well past that worry of not following through on anything or always dropping the ball. And instead, we might feel pretty cynical about the idea of finding and liking new things overall. I run into this with clients sometimes who have spent so much of their lives trying to stick with it, trying so hard to follow through on things and doing that in these neurotypical ways that are just not built for our brains. And they keep running into these roadblocks along the way. So they don't really even see the point anymore. What's the point in even trying? Now, I know for myself, whenever the experience of cynicism comes up, it's usually acting as a suit of armor. I've usually unintentionally put on this armor of cynicism when I'm trying something that I have maybe done before and I experienced a bunch of discomfort or what my brain labeled as failure in the past, right? So I put on this armor to protect myself from it. So cynicism becomes this kind of shield so that I don't have to feel that disappointment or that sense of failure again. Instead, rather than opening myself up to the vulnerability and the potential of disappointment as I find new things to like, my brain thinks, what's the point anyway? It's not like I'm going to stick with it. It's not like it's going to work out. It's not like we're going to continue enjoying the process, or we're just going to fizzle out our interest and stop doing the thing and it's going to be another unfinished project. So I might as well just stick with what I know. Now, as you can probably gather from my tone of voice and what I just said, that perspective is not super aligned with the theme of this episode, which is all about how we can generate greater happiness and fulfillment and peace and contentment, or however you want to describe that experience. So rather than fueling the fire of, well, what's the point? Why even bother trying? It's not like I follow through. It's not like I finish it. Rather than asking ourselves, what's the point, and leaving it as that open question loop for the brain to just ruminate on day after day, let's answer the question. What is the point? Why are we doing this? Let's remind ourselves of the very reason why it is worth it. Why are we willing to start liking more stuff again? We can remind ourselves that finding more things to like actually helps us tap into our natural curiosity. And when we engage in new activities and we discover new interests, it can provide this sense of excitement and adventure. And this continual exploration can help our minds stay active and engaged, which is, of course, especially beneficial for our ADHD brains, which thrive on stimulation. Plus, when we find new things to like, it adds that variety to our lives. Again, gold star for the ADHD brain. Variety can sometimes be what we need, that like missing piece to help ensure that we also stick with the regular, read boring routines that we do want to follow each day to help us keep moving toward our goals. In other words, by finding new things to introduce into our days, by finding new things to like, we're also introducing that extra boost of delight and variety, which in turn can help us boost our commitment and motivation to stick with the regular routines and things that we've decided we want to follow through on that support our priorities and our goals for that season. So we create this kind of ideal combination of delight with stability, both of which contribute to this overall goal of greater enjoyment. So again, step 1, find new things to like. Now let's talk about step 2, which is finding ways to like things that we haven't liked before. So this one can be a taller order for many of us. It certainly is for me, liking things that we've just decided we didn't like in the past. And if you are like me, you probably have some stories built up about things that are just really boring or challenging or tedious, or you just hate doing them. And often our initial reaction to certain activities is kind of shaped by these past experiences and the stories that we tell ourselves. And if we've found that this particular activity or task or thing is something that's boring or challenging or tedious, if we found that in the past, it is easy to build up this narrative that reinforces that experience going forward. These stories that our brain has created become our default perspective. And then, of course, that makes it hard to start seeing these activities in a new light. So, for example, I think a classic for many of us in the ADHD space are the recurring household tasks, things like doing laundry, washing dishes, the things that never end, right? Many of us have built up these stories about how they're so boring, they're never ending, they're just plain tedious. And since we've had that poor experience with these activities in the past, our brain has collected all the evidence to further prove that laundry and dishes are inherently awful, doing them anyway. Each of these quote unquote negative experiences serve as this evidence to support our belief, right? The brain's like categorizing it, cataloging it, more evidence, see how terrible it is, here's all my evidence. So if you have struggled with a task before, or you found it particularly unenjoyable, whether it is laundry or dishes, or it might be answering emails or submitting expense reports or whatever else is on your list of boring, tedious things you don't want to do, your brain has filed away that information. And it has now reinforced this idea that the activity is inherently unpleasant. And so this cognitive bias can become a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, where we approach the activity with dread, and therefore it continues to be a dreadful experience. So for example, maybe you've had times where the laundry has piled up so high. It's piled so far to the point where the brain is completely overwhelmed and frozen and can't seem to get started. And you've had those experiences more than once, and it's really kind of reinforced it in your brain. Or you've spent what felt like hours washing dishes and drying dishes and loading and unloading the dishwasher, and then more dirty dishes appear again immediately, and they never stop, right? So these quote unquote negative experiences make it really easy for the brain to believe that these chores are never-ending drains on our executive function. And I promise you, you will find many people to agree with that belief, myself included at times. So we keep reinforcing these beliefs, right? We keep reinforcing it. And this cognitive bias plays a significant role. If we believe that a certain activity is tedious or boring, we tend to focus on those aspects to really confirm the belief. What you focus on grows. So this selective attention means that we potentially overlook anything that could be remotely enjoyable because we're so focused on finding the miserable components. The more we focus on the quote unquote negative, the more that grows in our perception, which makes it even harder to break that cycle of how we think about the activity. So each time you think about how boring it is, how tedious it is, how much you hate doing the laundry or the dishes, and how much you just genuinely dislike it, that focus on the negative makes it increasingly difficult to motivate yourself. It reinforces the belief that these chores are inherently unpleasant. And the same is true for anything else in your life. It could be with particular people who may not be your cup of tea, or certain habits that your partner or your sister or your child do. Once the brain identifies them as a quote unquote problem, it looks more diligently to reaffirm that belief. So what can we do? How can we start liking things that we didn't like before? Well, one way is to start challenging our perspective by moving away from that all or nothing black and white thinking. So instead of viewing an activity as entirely good or entirely bad, we can start acknowledging that there's some gray in there, right? It's both enjoyable and unenjoyable. It's a both and. And this is a more nuanced approach, and it can help us to open up and find parts of that activity that we can actually appreciate. So instead of thinking, oh, I hate doing the laundry, it's so awful, it takes forever, it just takes up all my time, and then I forget about it, and we just keep going, consider that there might be small aspects that you could perhaps enjoy. Perhaps the satisfaction of seeing the clothes completely clean and hung up or folded or whatever in your closet. Or maybe it's that enjoyable experience of pulling the clothes out of the dryer when they're nice and warm and they smell so fresh. Or maybe you've pulled a tip from Atomic Habits or something, and you've paired the act of putting away laundry with listening to your favorite podcast or watching your favorite show. We can start challenging those beliefs, that all or nothing mindset, by finding the parts that we do enjoy. So again, to help yourself do this, you can intentionally reflect on the question, what do I like about this activity? Surely there's something that I find enjoyable. Challenge the brain to start pinpointing the specifics. What aspects do you like? Even if it's something small, help your brain start focusing on those components you do like. I am telling you, this can make a powerful shift in your overall perception of doing that activity. What could be fun here? Consider ways to actually make the activity more enjoyable. Can you turn it into a game? Can you set a timer to challenge yourself? Can you bring in music or a podcast or something? Can you invite friends or family members or whatever? Make it a social thing. Start thinking creatively about how you can introduce fun into that activity. I'm telling you, it can truly transform the experience and start finding things to like about it. I personally love to think about situations where if I'm dreading it or I don't enjoy it, I will think about someone who I know does love the activity. I love to ask myself, what do they think about it? They love doing this so much. What are their thoughts? Sometimes understanding why someone else really enjoys that activity or that thing can provide this really fresh perspective. So you might consider talking to someone who genuinely likes this task or activity that your brain has labeled as tedious. And you might ask them what they enjoy about it. Try seeing that activity through their eyes, their enthusiasm. Sometimes that can be just the thing to help shift a little bit in your mind and find one more thing to like. In fact, I have a client, if you're listening, you know who you are. She has such beautiful thoughts about doing laundry. She loves doing laundry. She literally hangs the clothes out on a line and just loves the experience and the scent and the routine of the entire practice. I am telling you, anytime she talks about laundry, I get excited about doing laundry. So I started channeling her energy and I can help get that boost, and I start liking more aspects of it. I start liking parts of the laundry process. So again, even if we don't naturally like a task, making the effort to find parts of it that we do like can have a powerful impact on our overall experience for so many different reasons, right? It feels less heavy to do the thing, right? We're not like carrying around that dread. We're actually learning to enjoy parts of it, which is so much better than dreading all of it. By finding those small moments of joy, we can really kind of transform that experience. We can sprinkle in the delight. Even if it's not an activity that we love as a whole, by appreciating parts of it, it can really make things more enjoyable. Now, it goes without saying that you probably won't shift your entire perspective and start liking everything that you once didn't. Okay, that's not the goal. So if there's any perfectionist brains out there thinking, okay, anything that I don't like, now I need to start liking everything. No, that would mean that you were a robot and you are not. Okay. But we can bring intention into the process. What if we could start liking parts of this thing, parts of that thing? Again, it is particularly wonderfully human to not love every activity and every experience. We are complex beings with so many different perspectives, so many different preferences. That's what makes this all incredible. But the key is to find and appreciate parts that could bring us joy, could bring us delight, even if they're in little small doses. So even if you never do become a fan of doing laundry or the dishes, you might enjoy the meditative aspect of the tasks or that satisfaction of the clothes put away. And these small joys can make household chores a more positive part in your life rather than this heavy dread to carry around every day. Okay, so that is step 2, finding ways to like things that you once didn't. And that brings us to step 3, which is recognizing how it feels to like something and doubling down on it. Over my years of coaching and doing my own work, I've noticed that we often get stuck in patterns. So we develop these habitual emotional responses based on our past experiences, and we keep repeating these patterns and we ingrain them even further. So over time, our nervous system becomes basically conditioned to these familiar feelings, whether they are positive or negative. And again, I always want to have scare quotes around those, right? Quote unquote positive or quote unquote negative, because I don't actually believe that there are positive and negative emotions. But this conditioning can make it quite challenging to break free from these old patterns and embrace the new, more quote unquote positive experiences. It's kind of like we have these Grand Canyon thought patterns or ways of experiencing things. We've gotten used to thinking and feeling a certain way, and it's really well worn, right? It's this very deep canyon of a pattern. And then all of a sudden, we're trying to create this distributary. By the way, I had to look up that word. I didn't know it was called a distributary, but it's where something like a river or something branches off from the main water source, right? So you have a river and then you have a distributary. A tributary, in case you're wondering or playing trivia, is where the water flows into the main body source. A distributary is where you're breaking off from it. There you go. But distributary, we're trying to create that from this Grand Canyon of a thought pattern. And so we're trying to branch off in this new direction. And that can be really uncomfortable for the brain. It can be very unfamiliar. And in fact, I've found that many of us are quite uncomfortable, quite uneasy with feeling more quote unquote positive, comfortable, enjoyable experiences. Enjoyable emotions like happiness, contentment, joy, delight, satisfaction. We might question whether we deserve to feel this way since we haven't gotten everything done yet, or we messed up in this other area, or we dropped the ball before, so probably we don't deserve to feel good. We've been conditioned by society to believe that in order to relax or feel good, we must have been super productive and gotten everything done off of that never-ending to-do list. We struggle to allow ourselves to feel something like confidence or happiness or accomplishment because we're always waiting for the quote-unquote other shoe to drop. And this fear of the other shoe can keep us from fully embracing and enjoying those moments of satisfaction and joy that come our way. So what can we do here? How can we start recognizing how it feels to like something and double down on it? Well, I first want to mention that if you are really struggling here, if it not only feels uncomfortable, but it actually kind of feels unsafe to be in a positive emotion, a comfortable experience, the first step is noticing that. And then from there, I would highly suggest reaching out to work with a trauma-informed therapist. I think that you can do some really great work in therapy there to potentially help work through anything that might be kind of blocking you from dropping into these more enjoyable emotions and experiences, because you deserve that. Okay. So if it feels almost unsafe to be in those more enjoyable experiences, I highly encourage you to get that support because you deserve to be able to feel them as well. Okay. Now, if it is more of a just kind of discomfort or unfamiliarity with these more comfortable emotions, or if it's more of a habitual pattern where your body and mind have just naturally practiced going down the Grand Canyon of uncomfortable instead, rather than naturally dropping into content or pleasurable or happy or whatever, if your brain has simply practiced that and it's more familiar with feeling unsettled, frustrated, anxious, worried more often, then in this case, I think the key lies in both curiosity and a willingness to be in the discomfort of feeling comfortable. And I know this is going to sound so strange, but stick with me, okay? Are you open to the idea of experiencing and acknowledging these quote unquote positive emotions? Are you open to expanding your capacity to be with this new, more pleasurable feeling? Even though that sounds strange, because yes, I am asking you, are you willing to sit and be with happiness and contentment? But I'm also telling you, this can be very uncomfortable for so many of us. For so many of us who are always go, 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 and we think we need to prove and hustle and fix and do constantly. By intentionally recognizing and appreciating things that we like, and allowing ourselves to expand our capacity to truly enjoy the experience of liking it, we then expand our capacity to experience happiness more frequently, more deeply. Now, this made me think about the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And in this book, he introduces this concept that he calls the upper limit problem. And this is essentially this idea where we have an internal thermostat setting that determines how much we can experience and allow for success or happiness in our lives. And once we exceed that upper limit, we often unconsciously do things to kind of return to that familiar level of comfort. And I'm going to give you an example of what this has looked like for myself on my own journey over the past year of stepping into more stillness. Okay, my word of this year is to be still. And when I'm practicing that, when I'm leaning into allowing for more stillness. So for example, if I'm relaxing and enjoying a book, I'm sitting out on the deck in the sun with Bruno, and I'm just kind of having this slow Sunday morning or something, my brain all of a sudden will shift. It's like a flip of a switch. And then it's offering 15 different things I quote unquote should be doing that are more productive. It tells me, maybe you should focus on that productivity book on your Kindle rather than this Emily Henry book that you can't seem to put down. Or maybe rather than just sitting here with Bruno, you could do that, but also look for some new meal ideas because your usual routine is a little bit tired and you should really maybe start blah, blah, blah. Okay. And suddenly my mind has reached that point of discomfort where it no longer feels good to be doing something restful, since my nervous system is so used to being in go mode. It is like, hold on, this is not what we know how to do. Let's go back to what's familiar. Now, I think Hendricks creates this beautiful analogy that helps demonstrate this. And as I mentioned, he talks about it as this thermostat. So just as a thermostat helps regulate the temperature in a room, right, we have our own internal thermostat to regulate our emotional state. So if the room gets too warm, the thermostat kicks in, it cools it down. If it gets too cold, it kicks in, it turns it up. And so if I'm sitting there reading some fiction book with Bruno and suddenly my brain decides I need to be really productive and doing all these other things, I apparently had gotten too warm and my thermostat has kicked in. It's trying to cool me back down to what feels familiar, back into that comfort zone, and vice versa. There are, although I apparently can get quite cool here, but there are times when it gets way too chilly and my body is craving some downtime, some stillness, and then it kicks in naturally and it brings up the temperature, right? I'm able to rest for a little bit. So in this idea, Hendricks suggests that we can work on raising our thermostat setting to allow for more positive experiences, quote unquote, positive experiences in our lives. And that involves this increased awareness of what our upper limit is. What are we doing when we've reached that upper limit? And how can we start challenging those beliefs that keep us stuck in our comfort zone? Now, this has so many layers to it. I am going to do an entire episode on this concept. Frankly, I don't think we use this idea of the upper limit in a very supportive way right now. I have some thoughts about it, and I want to do a whole episode on it because I think we tend to use it against ourselves. So stay tuned for that. But for now, what I would love for us to do here is to learn how to expand our capacity, work toward raising our thermostat a little bit with these more comfortable emotions. Again, I will get to this much more in a future episode. So for now, we want to create awareness of where our comfort zone is. As a reminder, part 3 of increasing greater happiness and enjoyment in our lives, according to this 3-part framework we're looking at, is recognizing how it feels to like something and doubling down on that. So part 3 is all about building our awareness of how it feels to like something. What does that feel like? What is that experience? And are we willing to be in the experience of enjoyment more often? And I know it sounds like such a strange concept on the surface. Of course, we want to feel happy. Why wouldn't we want to? Well, look at what's happened before, right? Because even if we allow ourselves to start liking things and even start liking things we didn't like before, if we aren't able to allow ourselves to actually double down on that experience and allow ourselves to fully enjoy and like things, it's not going to stick around. So step 3 is key. Recognize how it feels to like something and double down on it. Now, if you have not yet subscribed to this podcast, please be sure to do so. That way, when I dive deeper into step 3 and this idea of the upper limit problem and how we can actually do that, you won't miss the episode. So tap the follow button on your podcast player or the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. But for now, over the next week or two, I invite you to take this simple 3-step framework as a challenge to bring more happiness into your life. Again, this framework was inspired by a tweet or a post from Lauren Wilford. And the quote is, "Big secret to happiness is just liking stuff. Finding more stuff to like, finding ways to like stuff you didn't before, and recognizing how it feels to like something and doubling down on that." And I would love to hear how you're doing that this week. Let me know over on Instagram. I am at I'm Busy Being Awesome. You can let me know on one of the posts for the episode or send me a DM. I cannot wait to hear from you. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you're ready to take these concepts and apply them to your life, if you're ready to learn how to support your ADHD in a way that's best for you, I invite you to check out today's show notes where you can learn more about how we can work together, both in my small group coaching program, We're Busy Being Awesome, and through one-on-one coaching. Also, if you want to learn my simple step-by-step approach to locking in a routine and making it stick, be sure to check out my free course called the ADHD Routine Revamp. You can grab it through the link in the show notes or head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/routine to sign up. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.